Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Configure Consulting's 30 Days to License Management webcast. My name is Anu Rao, and with me here I've got Sandeep Babar. Today we'll be sharing with you some of Configure Consulting's insights and best practices around optimizing software asset management, and specifically that's going to be geared towards understanding where, how, and how often software assets are being used. Before we get started, I'd just like to do a quick run-through of some webinar guidelines. Please keep in mind that this webinar is being recorded and that all lines are currently muted. We request you not to put your phone on hold while in the session. And also, we encourage you to submit any questions or comments you may have within the question and chat manager options on your webinar screen. We'll be going through all of those at the end of the presentation. So before we run through the agenda for the meeting, I'd just like to give everyone a quick overview and introduction to Configure Consulting. At Configure Consulting, we specialize in the delivery of cloud monitoring, security, and asset management solutions. And working with clients across North America, our team has been able to support improved performance and availability and efficiency for IT operations across the continent. Today specifically, we'll be discussing and providing an overview of the traditional approach to software asset management, and we'll call that the spreadsheet-based approach, where asset information is tracked either manually or through multiple repositories that eventually feed into Excel-based spreadsheets. We'll be talking about some of the key challenges and obstacles to efficiency with that approach, and also quantifying some of the costs that we typically see around inefficiency with that model. Following which, we'll talk to you about Configure Consulting's automated asset management solution. This is a means of automatically discovering, tracking, and managing software asset information. Sandeep is going to be presenting a very interesting demo that runs through a lot of the major questions that asset managers are routinely asked. So working within the HP asset management framework, we will be going over how assets are discovered, what gets discovered, and how all of this aligns to compliance and license management. We'll then go over a quick summary and also present an overview of what Configure Consulting can do for you within a 30-day time frame. As I mentioned, we do encourage you to enter any questions or comments you may have within the question and chat manager, and we'll take all of those questions and comments at the end of the presentation. So working with IT organizations across North America, we've observed a great deal of consistency in the types of challenges and the types of concerns that folks have around managing software assets. Specifically, these align to the fact that it's hard to keep track of software assets given the current trends of virtualization and cloud-based computing, where utilization is expanding exponentially, and manual models may not have, or manual approach to software asset management may not empower organizations with the tools to keep track of that exponential growth. Now, the mandate of asset management, which is generally asset allocation, the process of identifying and mitigating compliance risks, and also saving the organization money, can be daunting and also time-consuming when relying on unstandardized data and also unstandardized and ad hoc processes. So today what we'll be talking about is a one-stop shop, a consistent and standardized mechanism to bringing together software software information and aligning discovered information with business logic around contracts, entitlements, and the state of compliance. So when we start working with any organization around asset management, one of the first questions we ask them is, how do you currently manage your software assets? And normally we'll get one of three answers. The first and most common being that we don't. We don't have a process and we kind of just figure it out as we go. The second most common answer being that the organization is using one or multiple homegrown databases. And that's what we call, that aligns very closely to the third answer, which is the Excel sheet approach, where we've got multiple databases or we've got Excel sheets, some of which are populated by discovery and inventory tools, and some we update ad hoc. And here we see on this slide some of the challenges associated with all three of those answers. As all of you on the call must be familiar with, it's very difficult to validate accuracy with those approaches, and also keeping information up to date and doing your best to keep it accurate can be extremely time-consuming. When you are relying on ad hoc processes, it can be a challenge to ensure that data is normalized and reconciled such that what we're discovering and what we're capturing about software assets is closely tied to the contracts and the compliance protocols behind those assets. And one of the biggest challenges being that this approach is generally quite inefficient. And what we've got here is a scenario-based example that runs through some of the costs of that inefficiency. Let's pick on Microsoft Visio as just one example of a software license that's quite commonly deployed across organizations as a part of the standard build of a workstation, but actually rarely touched. So this particular example, and again, Microsoft Visio is just one example. It can be any number of software licenses that fit this model, where it costs about $221 per license, and across a large organization, you can have up to 5,000 installs. The manual approach to software asset management will not tell you that 150, or rather a very small percentage of those installs, were not touched in the last 6 months. Knowing this information and acting on this information would allow your organization to save upwards of $33,000. And again, with the Excel sheet-based approach, it's difficult to quantify and to ascertain the difference between software installs and software usage. And that's what we encourage our clients to move towards, bringing automation in with asset management. Running through just one more example that, again, touches on the Microsoft products. There's about a $110 difference between the standard and the professional licenses of Microsoft Office. And knowing that even just 200 of your installs are situations where just the standard is required and the professional is not, just knowing that information and acting upon that information can allow you to yield $22,000 worth of savings. So the main takeaway here is that there are significant opportunity costs to the manual approach of software asset management. And the organization can find huge bits of savings for IT budgeting and IT finance when they're able to understand not only where and to which devices software licenses are deployed, but also how they're being used and how effectively they're being used. This brings us to Configure Consulting's approach to software license management. This is a three-step approach, starting with discovery. We leverage HP's Universal Discovery and DDMI solutions as a best practice for discovering software license information across the organization. This allows us to accurately and in an automated fashion understand exactly what versions and what types of different softwares have been installed, and as I mentioned earlier, how they're being used. How many hours over the past 6 months has this software been opened on any given workstation? We're also we also take it very seriously to integrate existing asset management repositories. So whether this be third-party repositories or homegrown databases, bringing information into one centralized platform really does empower informed decision-making for software allocation and also budgetary decision-making. The next step being reconciliation. We bring data together in a standardized format against predefined license structures, whereby we're able to measure software installations by CPU or by any other parameter against which it's licensed. And this recognition logic can be developed for custom, homegrown, or open source software as well. And finally, reporting. Reporting is the means by which all this information and all this powerful data we gather can be used and can be actioned on. We work with the HP Asset Manager software to deliver customizable dashboards that are tailored to user roles and responsibilities. What that means is we're able to harness a tool such that executives are able to see types of data that's appropriate to them, and as well business service owners are able to see exact costs and exact licensing information pertaining to their line of business. So there's a high degree of flexibility here, and also important to note that in addition to the dashboards, we've got audit-friendly reports. Reports that have been tailored to the requirements of major software vendors for audit requirements. Sandeep will go through a lot of this in his demonstration, and I do encourage you to pay attention to all of it, and especially those audit-friendly reports, which can be very powerful. At this point, I'll pass the ball over to Sandeep, who will walk you through his demonstration.
Thanks, Anu. So for the demo outline, we're going to be looking at how we get these assets into Asset Manager, how they're discovered using an automated tool such as DDMI or UD10. Once those assets have been entered into Asset Manager, how do we utilize that information? How do we count the different software titles that are in our infrastructure? We'll then move on to look at some of the out-of-the-box features, dashboards, and templates that come with Asset Manager to help ease the transformation of counting these software titles and ensuring companies remain compliant and saving money. We'll then look at some audit-friendly reports where we can identify underutilized software titles and other software title reports. And then look at some customizable reports. As each client and each customer uses Asset Manager for a different, unique reason, we're able to tailor reports to those different reasons that they may have. That being said, let's get into this demo. Here we can see the different software titles that are available and tools that have been entered into Asset Manager. The first one here being Prod DDMI is its name, and we can see the different high-level attributes that are being pulled in. We have some general information such as the model, the assignment, whether it's in use or whether it's in stock, and the in-service date as well. As this is a virtual machine, Asset Manager does identify the relationship from a parent-to-child VM standpoint, where it knows that this virtual machine belongs to a specific ESX host. And we can identify that here under the Business Services tab. Moving on to the Hardware tab, we can see the different hardware information that it offers, the different CPU information, the memory, the amount of RAM and disk size, as well as the BIOS information. The Scanner tab here shows the different scanners and different times it was scanned using our automated tool. So we know the different builds of that scanner, when it was last scanned, and when the next time it will be scanned. On the Extensions tab here, we can see some high-level information We have some multimedia information here, the different video cards that it may have, the resolution, as well as some different networking cards that it may have as well. Under the drive information, this is the information regarding of the different mount points on a specific asset that we may discover. In this example, we have the C drive, a floppy drive, and the CD-ROM drive. We can see the total size as well as the free space. Under the networking tab, we can see the general networking information, the IP address, domain, as well as some of the different networking cards that it may have. Here we can see the different MAC addresses that it has for each card as well. Under the operating system tab, we can see the last time this device was scanned for software inventory, as well as some information regarding the operating system. We can see it's a Windows Server 2008, its build number, what service pack it's on, and its installation directory as well. And finally, we can see here all the different software titles that have been installed on this machine. We have some high-level information here that shows the different models and where it's installed. And as well, we can see here at the bottom that we have 27 different software titles. So now that we have this information in Asset Manager, what can we do with it? And how do we utilize its features so we can start to count these software titles and ensure compliancy? So if we want to start off by looking at the software counters, and how do we create one in the different options that we have with it? Here we can see the different types of how we can count the software, either being commercial or non-commercial, or if it's not defined. So being commercial software titles, we can count it either by CPU, by user, by workstation, or by a specific installation. A good example of a software title that you all very well should be familiar with is Microsoft SQL Server, in which its license model allows you to either install it by installation or even by CPU. We have some non-commercial software titles as well, such as any adware or freeware open source software that we may wish to track within our infrastructure. So we have those capabilities as well. Once we've created our software counters, let's take a look at the different options that we have within it. On our software counters here, we can see that we have the different types that we've created here. Different ones being by company, by installed software on certain computers, by different companies and cost centers as well. On the right-hand side here, we have different options that we can use. Whether we want to include it as a template, whether we want to ensure that these counters are being demonstrated in our compliance reports, and our different right counts and entitlement counts. On the bottom here, we have some general results of the calculations. So if we're doing it by rights or installations, we can see that information as well as if we're compliant or not. Under the rights tab here, we can see the different options and how we've arrived at our results. We can see that we're being calculated by the different cost centers here. We want to group them by cost centers. We can also see how we've calculated it and what query we're using to see that information. So now that we've counted our software titles, let's take a look at some of the out-of-the-box options that are given with Asset Manager and how we can leverage them to the best of our ability. If we continue the example on Microsoft here, and we can look at the out-of-the-box dashboards that Microsoft provides. So in this graph here, we can see that we're looking at Microsoft Office, and we can see all the different types of versions it has here on the left-hand side, and the amount of installs that we have going across. Now the graph shows here under the blue bars the number of software installations or utilizations that we have within our infrastructure. The yellow bar shows the amount of software licenses that we've purchased and we're allowed to have. And then based upon the blue and yellow bars, we're either showing a green bar to show whether we're overspending our software licenses, or red to show that we're at risk. Let's take a look at Microsoft Project, for example. On the 2007 Standard Edition, we can see that we've installed the software 9 times. However, we only have 1 license to install it on. That makes us not being compliant by 8. Another example to show would be 2010 Standard Edition, to show that we haven't installed the software at all in our infrastructure. However, we've already purchased 43 licenses for this. That makes us overspending by 43. And to assign a dollar value to it, what we would do is find out the cost of license per license and multiply it by the number that we're overspending, so in this case 43. Some other examples of the out-of-the-box features that we have with Asset Manager go across the Microsoft board, showing Microsoft SQL Server here, which shows our different methods of how we can count software titles, either by CPU or how it's installed per server. Microsoft Office Visio, and Microsoft Windows servers. Once we've looked at these graphs, we can also determine some of our underutilized software titles. See, why aren't we capturing the most of the software that we've purchased? So this report that's just loading right now will show you the different types of softwares that have not been used within a certain period of time. So we have some options here to choose our software vendor. We have the ability to either focus this report on a specific software vendor that we have identified, or to see it all the software vendors across our infrastructure. For this example, we'll look at all the software vendors. Next, we have to enter in the time that we want to see when the software has not been used. By being used, whether it hasn't been ran or opened or utilized on a specific machine. So for this example, we'll type in 6 to show us all the software titles that have not been used in the last 6 months. So here's the list of software titles that have not been used in the last 6 months. We can see that our software titles are organized by alphabetical order, so the first one being Adobe Acrobat 3D and the version number here. We can also see some very important information, the last time it was used, a date and time, where it's installed, and what computer it's installed on. We can also see the assignment here, whether it's in use or not. The assignment is particularly important as we do not want to be spending money on software licenses that are either sitting in the stock room or not being deployed in our production environment at all. If we wanted to take a look at some of the customizable stuff and reports that we can use within Asset Manager, we can look at the results of our software counters. Here's the result of all the different software counters that we've created. As you can see in Asset Manager, it gives you a high-level information here to show that there's 145 different ones that we've completed. We can see the different software titles and some high-level information as this has been grouped by different departments. So we can see in the IT department the number of rights we have, and how many we have installed, as well as the development department as well. So how is this report useful to us? If we wanted to see whether we're compliant or not, we can see that, or whether we're overspending. But how do we get a dollar value to it? With Asset Manager, all of our reports are easily customizable. So to add in a calculation to show whether or not we're being compliant, we can do that right now. So here we can see the cost for compliance for each software installation. If we look at Microsoft Project 2007 Standard Edition, we can see the cost just to become compliant will be $545,000. If we look at 2007, we can see that we're not compliant. We can see that we are compliant, however, we're overspending by $117,000. So we bought a lot more licenses than we don't really need. And this information is key to be able to ensure essential cost savings. Another beauty with Asset Manager is that all of our software titles and reports that we generate can be exported very easily to Microsoft Excel. We have some information here where we can export the table, labels, and column headers as well, or we can choose to export it to a specific file type. That being said, let's review what we've just seen. So we've been able to see how we discover these assets and bring them into Asset Manager. The additional features that DDMI and using an automated discovery tool brings, as well as capturing the hardware information and all the different software titles. We're able to see how we're using that information now that it's in Asset Manager, and how do we leverage it. So we saw how we can group the different software titles either by department or by specific licensing models, as an example, CPU versions for different software titles. We also have seen the different dashboards and templates that are available as well. So some of the out-of-the-box features that show what we can do with the information and how we can display them for different groups of our management. We also saw some software reports to show and identify underutilized software titles, as well as whether those assets are in use or not. And then finally being able to see the different software counter reports where we can see the cost for compliance in a report and how easily it is to customize those depending on your needs as an organization. That being said, I'll pass it back to Anu.
Thanks, Sandeep, and thanks for that very powerful demo. Before we move into the 30 days portion of this presentation, I'd just like to really emphasize one of the sections that Sandeep talked about, which was being able to measure overspending and also being able to measure cost for compliance. So looking at the two screenshots below, we'll start at the left-hand side. The left-hand side is a graph that shows the top 15 overspending applications. These are the top 15 software licenses where we're paying for the license but we're not actually using it. This is money that the organization is currently wasting, so to speak. Being able to capture this information, present a clear authoritative list, and assign dollar figures based on procurement and contract logic has proven to be hugely useful for a lot of our clients. On the flip side, and this is the red colored bar chart on your right-hand side, these are your top 15 applications at risk. Meaning in this demo environment, if we were to currently be audited by Oracle per the top level item that you see, we are currently not compliant, and there's a huge risk of penalties and audit risk associated with that. And what this chart shows you is exactly what needs to be done to become compliant. So, drilling into this type of information, we can see how many licenses short are we, and as with the previous chart, what's the dollar amount associated to that. So very powerful information and useful for any organization. A lot of this is coming, this is being presented in Asset Manager, as Sandeep demonstrated, but a lot of the information is coming from automated discovery tools. In this case, the HP Universal Discovery and DDMI solutions. So now I'd like to talk through what can Configure Consulting do within 30 days. We've worked extensively in the field of license compliance management, and what we found is that within a really short time frame, we're able to show huge amounts of value. So within this 30-day time frame, we're able to set an organization up with a starter package to begin to grasp the concept of automated license management and for them to understand what it would look like within their environment. So this involves discovery across a small subset of the environment, reconciliation and normalization across some of the discovered data, and creating reports that align closely to software asset management objectives. This is a solid working foundation to branch off into other areas of asset management as well. And we highly encourage you to contact either myself or Sandeep. Our contact information, our email addresses are below. If you'd like any more information on what this may look like for your organization, as well as some specifics on what would be involved. And at this time, we would like to open up the floor for questions and answers. Before doing so, I would like to thank everyone who has taken the time out to attend this webinar. We really appreciate your attention and your participation. And we look forward to keeping in touch and working together through further discussion. Below on this slide here, you see the contact information for both myself and Sandeep. We, again, highly encourage you to contact us via phone or email if you've got any questions around the software license compliance solution. You can also find some very interesting information, including case studies, at www.configureconsulting.com. So we would encourage you to check all of that out.